Hi. Hi, Bharti. Okay, I'm going to bring Sathya onto this conversation in just a bit. Sathya, yes, I see that you're here. Just give me a moment. Hi.
Hello, can you see
How-
me?
Can you hear me, Sathya?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, all good. Lovely.
Wonderful.
I'm not able to see your sari well enough though.
All right, let me move out a little bit.
Yeah, neither can anyone see mine. Oh, wow. What sari is that?
So that's actually a Bhagalpur tussar.
Oh, wow. And did you get it in Chennai?
Yes,
Wow,
yes.
beautiful. Lovely. So, welcome, Sathya. So, this is a series called In the Company of the Sari, which is by Panjavatnam Silks. And I have had the opportunity of kind of catching up with a whole bunch of women from different walks of life and who all sort of share common love and passion for the sari. And I was keen to have a chat with you because we've worked together. I've seen you, wear so many saris to work. And it would be nice to kind of talk about a lot of things and, of course, bring in the sari as well. So for those who've just joined, I'm going to briefly introduce Sathya Sriram. If you didn't read the introduction that I posted on the page, Sathya Sriram is a strategy and marketing leader at a leading MNC. She started her career with McKinsey & Co., a strategy consulting firm in the US, and moved to Chennai in 2010. She joined the Hindu group and worked there until last year. And I had the opportunity of working with her closely during that time. Over there, she handled strategy and marketing. Interestingly, Sathya holds a PhD in Neuroscience from the Johns Hopkins University and is passionate about bringing her understanding of the brain to marketing and leadership development. Over the last 10 years, she says that she's been back in Chennai, or Madras as she knows it. She's been an avid sari shopper and a collector of fabrics, from the soft cottons for daily wear to a range of silks for occasions and workwear. Her favorite sari, and we will talk about that, is a sari made from banana tree fiber, I agree with you, a truly unique and elegant drape. Thank you so much, Sathya, for taking time off your busy schedule and to kind of chat with us. Firstly, I'm going to start off by asking you, I know that you're right now in Coonnor, in your home.
Right.
What's life like in the hills while we're all like roughing it out here in the noisy chaos of the city?
Well, firstly, thank you, Akhila, for having me. It's truly a privilege to talk about a topic that's so close to my heart. Yes, I have been in Coonnor. We were privileged because we got locked down back in March, and we were here with the kids. They had some time off from school, and so we were here in our home, and then we just ended up staying. Turns out, we're sort of about 10 kilometers from the nearest town, so we are isolated, other than a weekly trip that I go into town to actually pick up perishables and groceries. But it's been amazing for us because we have nothing else to do but to bond as a family like everybody else in their home. But we can also do it outdoors, right? Because we can go on really long walks, and when it's not raining, but really long walks at all times of the day. So sometimes when we grab the sunshine early morning, or sometimes at 4 o'clock if a call gets cancelled, we just boot up and take a long walk.
Oh, what fun! Are you as a family like an outdoorsy kind of people? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I've always enjoyed the outdoors. I think I spent about 13, 14 years in the US, and that's where sort of my love for the outdoors began as a college student, when some of my American classmates actually took me out and introduced me to the beautiful outdoors of Oregon, a state that's between California and Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow.
It's known for its, beauty and natural beauty. And so that's where my love for the outdoors grew. And so when we got this home, it's, absolutely stunning. We can take walks out for as long as we'd like, right? If you want a short walk within the compound, that works too. You want a 10-kilometer walk, we can find a way to actually trace that out. In fact, last summer, for the first time, we took the kids on a trek to the Himalayas, so that they would start enjoying the outdoors as well. So a 6-day hike. And we had a blast. We were out in Uttarakhand and had the Gangotri right in front of us as we did the trek.
Wow, so beautiful. Sathya, I've been asking everybody this question basically because it's like, I want to know the answers and I want to see if my answers from this question like matches with anybody's. But I want to ask you, like, what have been your key takeaways from, this whole lockdown? All of us have kind of felt it and responded to it so differently. So I'm curious about, and in some sense, we have similar trajectories. I mean, like working women, working from home, children, husbands that have like full-time jobs. So like, that sense, like what have been your key takeaways from...
Well, I think it's taught us more than anything else the pleasure of actually hanging with family and finding those moments that otherwise, we would have probably chosen to go out with friends instead, or constant distractions that our daily life seem to give us. So I think that family bonding is the first one for me, right? I think we've all found things to do together in isolation. At the same time, be much more accommodating of one another because we're in our spaces and in each other's spaces all the time.
Yeah.
That's for me the biggest takeaway. I think the second thing is truly the importance of hygiene, right? I think I've taken the opportunity to reteach the kids, at least at home, and all of us to be extra cautious. I don't think we think about as much how much we are touching. I tend to be anal about it even before this, and I think this is even further heightened, that sense of being aware of what you are touching and how to continue to keep yourself safe in these times. And I think that's actually gone up quite a bit as well.
Yeah, interesting perspective. Yeah, lovely. Yeah, super. So, Sathya, I want to ask you, you have a fairly hectic job. You work in a strategy and leadership position in a well-known company. I want to ask you, what are your work days like? I mean, have things changed? Because, everybody's talking about how businesses have been hit and stuff. Like, my life hasn't changed. My life's actually become busier, actually. But I'm curious to know, how are things at your end?
So, yeah, I mean, I think a few things have definitely changed. My work days, in good and bad ways, right?
Right.
So, in good ways, and let's start with that, I actually am not on a plane, which I used to be all the time, almost every week.
I know.
And so that's been a huge relief, right? To be actually not traveling. And I think for the first time in all of these years, I realized the toll that travel takes on you. You don't realize what it does, sort of your energy levels and the exhaustion sort of, but now I feel like all of those extra hours and energy I have because I'm not traveling. On the negative side, I think it's just nonstop, right? There's Zoom calls that you have to be on and present. I mean, even when I was traveling, I would have at least the plane time and the airport ride time that I would have as me time. Now there's none of that. And so it's been a constantly on video. I think after that initial excitement of being on video, many people now turn it off and get on Zoom calls. But I find that to be incredibly rude. So I try to be on video, which means you have to look at least energetic and be engaged because it's very quick to pick up, right?
Yeah.
The number of meetings and hours in the day have just sort of extended.
And best in DJs, right?
Yeah. That said, I only have to dress this, on the top half. I don't have to worry about what's below the waist.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I guess we're all like, in some sense, there is this whole blurring of work and home, right? I feel like if I'm not working, I'm actually working at home. Like I'm doing stuff at home. So I think that how have you?
No, absolutely. I think it's sort of a continuum now. There's no break and there's no schedule, right? It's just sort of, I also do appreciate though the flexibility of wearing my iPods and cooking, right? Sometimes I'll be making dosas for the kids and I have to take a 7:30 call. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And so that flexibility and almost the actually empathy that people have for one another in these situations has definitely increased.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I want to ask you about, you've always had a kind of a fairly busy career. The time that we met, you often talked about how busy your career has always been, and you've always pursued a career. I'm not sure when you took a break when you had your children. Did you?
No, I was back after 3 months of
Yeah.
maternity leave in both cases.
Right. So I want to talk to you, Sathya, about, just as a woman, and I like to have this conversation with women who have careers, like what is the role of career and how do you think does career define who you are, like your identity, so to speak?
Akhila, it's always been who I am, right? And I've actually been privileged to be born in a household and married into a household that has never differentiated, whether it is me or my husband and the need for a career. I think it's just something that we've taken for granted. As I tell the kids, right? I mean, you go to school, I go to work. And we all have to find something to keep ourselves busy and to find meaningful ways to contribute back to society in some way, shape, or form. And work allows me to do that and allows me to stay busy, allows me to contribute to society beyond what I could do. It's actually been enjoyable experiences, right? Because you also meet a whole bunch of people through these experiences that you otherwise would not have met. And I think that, you're richer for that.
Yeah.
Thanks to sort of the different jobs and roles that I've held.
Right. Do you want to talk about some of the interesting, like your memorable, career takeaways, your experiences from I'm sure
there's many. I think for me, the most important things that help one have a professional career in addition to everything else that we want to do at home and accomplish at home is who you marry. Because at some point, sort of that ends up defining how much space, independence our society actually gives us, right? And I think that ends up being a very defining decision in one's life. For me, the high points have been different over different times. I am particularly grateful for the company with which, at which I had both my children, because of how much they actually supported me during those times. Obviously, I was unable to give my 100 and 200%, but they supported me through those times, and I'm hugely grateful and gave back when I was back in full force. And so that's a big high point, and I'm truly grateful to the companies that I worked for that enabled me to do that. I think the other high point has been ways or experiences that have allowed me to find something that I'm truly passionate about. It's rare that one actually knows intuitively what one is really good at or what one is excited by. And I've been grateful through both especially at the Hindu, when I found my second love of marketing, and I didn't have as much exposure in the past. I had bits and pieces, but it truly gave me the opportunity, gave me the freedom to explore and to actually find my second passion.
Right. Lovely. So, Sathya, I want to talk to you a little bit about the idea of ambition. On Women's Day, actually, incidentally, I happened to be on a panel where we talked about how, there is increasingly, a severe paucity of women in leadership positions, right? Why is it that women, get like class 12 results? It's the girls who are topping the list, where middle management, either because they have children, I don't know, or life comes in the way, I don't know what, they fall off. And why is it that that we don't have enough women in leadership. And as someone who is in that position, how do you think you can inspire and women to kind of not fall off the track?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a global problem that our society has been dealing with for a long, long time, right? And many studies have shown that it's actually, as you go get more senior in tenure and experience, the number of women in those roles are actually abysmally low. So if you think about class 12 and then college graduate, and the drop-off is pretty high right there. And then people who start careers are able,
Right.
There's about maybe anywhere between 30 to 50%, depending on the company you work for, that actually induct women, many, sort of women in their workforce. The challenges, I think, Akhila, tend to be very quickly when one gets married. That's the first challenge, right? Largely because the way our society continues to be built and families continue to actually operate, you move and you follow wherever your sort of spouse is, right? And therefore what happens is that's the first break that one has to end up taking.
Correct.
Subsequently, it becomes children, right? One child, two children, the number of breaks add up. And if you're not, if the gap in the time away ends up being too long, then you sort of get into a certain rhythm and that is very hard to break out of, right? Everyone starts to expect that you'll be around all the time, right? Your child expects that you'll be around all the time. Family expects that you'll be around all the time. And how do you actually walk away from something that is truly meaningful on a daily basis, right? So work and what you find, what you want to do professionally has to be so much more meaningful than the housework, right? Or being at home. To be able to walk away from that, because it is actually fairly joyous to cook a meal and have the entire family enjoy it.
I know, yeah, I suppose. Yeah, in a while I did that, like just full time, but I know what you mean. But also, so just finished Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In, and she talks about how society in some way tends to look down in some sense on women who are inherently ambitious. That ambition is like are you having a network issue, Sathya?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. No, I thought you have.
No, the sun set and it's getting a little dark, so I thought I'd just turn on the lights.
Lovely. No, I was asking you about ambition, right? And is ambition a bad thing? Because I don't know if you watched this movie called The Intern, where this woman's like pursuing her career and her husband's actually like hands-on with a child, and the women who who are hands-on with the children in school one day, they're just like totally being like really mean to her. So I'm curious about how do career women also be on top of the game as far as like childcare and how do you do that actually?
Well, it takes a village to bring up the children, I think. And that's the first rule, right? So one of the big choices that we made was to actually move to Madras. We have parents, family. I have a long list of backups for when the nanny doesn't show up. And all because of an extended family and a village, right, that I can actually count on. So that's a big part of this. But let me come back to your first question around ambition itself, Akhila. I think that ambition as we define it will be something that we deeply desire, right? And want to excel and achieve at. Right? I mean, that's how I would define ambition. And that could be pretty much anything, right? I suck at art, but there are so many people who can do amazing things at art, and that deep desire to achieve in that field, in what they are doing, is ambition, right? And so it's how we choose to actually define it. In my case, I've been able to contribute in some way professionally to a number of organizations, and that's actually been where I draw my excitement from. And so I think that it's how we all choose to define it, and then as long as we are excelling and finding the energy and joy, you know, it's whose default.
I mean, it's great because, I feel like, in some way, like in the industry that I work in, I know I work with, artists. And for some reason, people think that they're not ambitious. But I think they are by far the most ambitious I've worked with. I mean, I mostly interact with women, and women who are like, 50 plus, 55 plus, like juggling like families and children and grandchildren. And they sometimes telling me like, hey, we have a call at like 10 p.m. And they're actually like, managing it all. Like, yeah. But what I was trying to say is, in some ambition is somehow we tend to associate it with a corporate kind of world, which is like you rightly pointed out, that if you did something which you enjoy and desire and find inspiration from, then that's ambition as well. So that's a great point. Yeah. Sathya, I want to ask you about, you studied neuroscience at the Johns Hopkins University. And I want to ask you about how that training and that education has come in handy, if at all, in terms of the work that you do, which is consulting, marketing. Like, how have you learned or to apply the principles of neuroscience to this context?
Yeah. So, actually, the brain is one of the most fascinating organs in our human body, right? At least I venture to say it's one of my most memorable moments when I held the human brain for the first time in my hands, and I had the privilege of doing that as part of my PhD training. Wow. It's actually a very, very fascinating organ, and everything you do is so interconnected and controlled by the different layers and parts of your brain. And so for me personally, it's been particularly interesting to apply the principles of neuroscience in a couple of different places, right? The first is around marketing itself. What is marketing? It's essentially finding ways to trigger an affinity that you can actually develop towards a product, right? And so if there is the right triggers, whether it is visual cues, words, colors, actually start to play, and those connections actually and triggers allow you to respond and build affinity. And so you can figure out.
Yeah, sorry. Just give me a second. I think your screen is blurring and mine. And I can hear you, but I can't see you very well. Your screen's completely blurred. Can anybody else, anybody who's here, if you can just give me a thumbs up and tell me if I feel like I can't see Sathya at all. Just give me a moment. Somebody will respond.
No problem.
Are you able to see her well?
Someone's giving a thumbs.
Yeah, so you're able to see you well? Okay. Maybe then I will.
Can't see her. Okay, let me do one thing. Let me just
Even I can't see her. Okay, yeah.
Is this better?
Just a little better, but I think.
Is anyone using? Can you turn off the internet?
A little better, Sathya. I think we could. Yeah.
Okay, super.
Yeah. You were saying.
So I was thinking marketing about triggers build affinity for a particular product or an experience. And so it's about figuring out what kinds of triggers actually to the segments that you want to respond to the product that you are putting there, right? So constantly you're thinking about sort of, what appeals, what doesn't appeal, what kind of colors, what kind of choices of words, what placements, all of these end up having an impact, and it's how your brain chooses to pick these up, right? And to analyze that and to be able to actually study it is hugely helpful. A second area that I actually use the principles of neuroscience is leadership development. I do a lot of that both in my spare time as well as in my job, and essentially the brain plays so many tricks on our own behaviors as well as our perception of other people's behaviors. And this then allows us to actually learn to manage our emotions, how we respond, how we react, what we say, what we do, in order to grow as a leader and actually respond to the group of people that we're surrounded by. And so bringing those principles into sort of my work has been truly fascinating.
Wow. I'd like for you to, share your experience of, working at the Hindu, which was, in terms of strategy and marketing, right? And that was like, I think your sort of your first stint at marketing, right? Sathya, did you mention that?
Yes.
Yeah. So could you just talk about what it was like, and also one of the most erstwhile brand of, the country and Chennai, so what was that experience like?
Yeah, I was motivated to join the Hindu group because it's a brand that I actually grew up with, and therefore hold very, very dear to my heart, right? Some of the things that I actually enjoyed doing the most there was taking the brand to a set of people through very, very unique ways. We did a whole bunch of campaigns and activities that had never been tried before by the group itself and in the city. And that was a lot of fun. I think the second thing was actually building a team that I really, really enjoyed working with. It's rare that you actually have that privilege of building a team ground up. Very often you're actually thrown into a situation where you have to work with the people that are around you. And it was, had the privilege of actually identifying and selecting a team that I had so much fun working with throughout that time. And I think the third thing was actually identifying new areas for the group to grow into, right? Whether it was some of the marketing solutions work that you and I did together, Akhila, or even the digital subscription work, right? So identifying, exploring new challenges and figuring out how to actually make this happen in a way that, is very cost effective, at the same time will have impact, was actually a lot of fun.
Right. Lovely. Sathya, I want to talk to you a little bit about, female friendships. This is like an area I always ask all women. And I want to talk to you about what do you think about the power or the power of positive female friendships, and why do you think it's important to kind of for women to surround themselves with women who really have their backs, so to speak, and how do you do that? Have like a large, friend circle, especially women who understand your challenges in some way, show empathy, because I think that's crucial, right? To kind of, find in friendship like that sense. So could you talk to us?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to actually have that positivity, as you mentioned it, largely because you need to have the energy to do everything you have to do, right? Both at home and at work. And who better to draw that energy from than people who actually understand it, right? And then it sort of becomes very mutual. So one of the things I do, for example, is with a number of moms and working moms, I actually block off breakfast times, because it's a really nice time that you have after the kids leave school during normal times, and and when you have to start work, right? And I find that most folks are able to accommodate that time and not be distracted. And therefore, we're able to give energy to one another and actually catch up. So breakfasts are actually one of my favorite catch-ups with my mom friends. The second is actually to maintain a network, right? One of the challenges that women run into is to actually be able to find the time to be able to maintain networks and maintain contact, because there's so much to do between work and home that it gets deprioritized. If I had to choose between hanging out with my child and calling a friend, I will choose hanging out with my child. And so more often than not, what happens is that we end up deprioritizing the networking and the connecting with other women. And so finding these slots are important. The second thing I do is I actually maintain a list. And I know it's a very logical, unemotional thing to do, but it's how I work. And so I actually maintain a list of people that I'd like to stay in touch with, and then go through that systematically. It reduces the inertia of thinking who you will get in touch with. And so once I, exchange a few messages or give someone a call, they move to the bottom of my list so that they actually will come back over time, right? So it's a little bit of of something that I do in order to ensure that I find the time and make it happen.
Right. Wow. So I do know that you're like a really like a real numbers person, and also like very, very like thing is really so like planned, like whatever. I want to ask you about how you
Akhila, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to repeat that.
Yeah.
Can you repeat that, Akhila?
I was going to ask you about how your career in consulting that actually manifest the way we live our life on a day-to-day basis as well. So I want to ask, there have been any conscious influences in terms of your life as a manifested or the way you live your life on a daily basis?
Are you talking about individuals or just the kind of work that is done?
No, I'm talking about like the kind, for example, let me tell you, just by virtue of working with artists, for example, now, there are like a set of things that I have learned to kind of iron out in my daily life. Like there are things that I learned from my work that I kind of put in this in terms of the things I do at home, right? Which is probably not the way it would have been when I was a journalist, for example. So I'm saying like that, like takeaways from your profession and have found expression in terms of like you talked about numbers, you talked about making lists, planning ahead, so that sort of a thing. I'm curious about and I'm trying to see if there are any connections in the way who we are and the kind of professions that we're naturally kind of drawn to.
Interesting. So I'm a list person, but that's been sort of my intrinsic nature. I think what I have learned and drawn from work is maybe this is a good example. Planning the kids' snacks and meals ends up being an Excel sheet, right? And it's actually a chore for many, and it's a repeated chore, right? It happens on a weekly basis. And so I have an Excel spreadsheet that actually lists all the snack items, and I have a table that says Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and they have a morning snack they carry to school and an evening snack once they come home. And so every week is actually literally a copy paste to create that table. from a master list, right? And this is, I would say, a very strange way of operating, but it actually makes it easier because I don't have to think about it every week. I'm literally just operating copy paste.
Wow, fantastic. Oh my God.
The other thing that I think is a other thing that I think is, I you know, I don't know if it's a good habit or a bad habit, but it is a practice. One of the things in consulting is you're always communicating through PowerPoint, right? And charts. And so very instinctively, I always have to draw out a chart in order to communicate my point, right? And it's almost the first way I actually think about something is through a chart. And so once I'm able to do that, then I can communicate it and translate it into any other way. But the first instinct is to have a paper and a pen and and to actually draw it out as a chart.
Wow. Fascinating. Yeah. Sathya, I'm curious about, like, as a consultant, like, I'm just curious about, like, what would you think are the core, like, principles and values or that kind of consulting? Consulting is a very big word, but there is so many, like, distinct, like, value systems that we associate with good consultant, right? What would you think they are?
I think one of the biggest ones is client first, right? Because as a consultant, your customer is your client, and you have to think about them first, and that's a key and only value, right? That will actually matter the most. The second thing I think from a value perspective is the people, the team that you have that ends up doing the crazy hours and willing to do whatever it takes to actually get to the right answer, right? And so having the teams back and having sort of the right team that you can count on is really important. And so people and everything associated with their growth and their success is actually a key value that I think is important for consultants in general. I think the third thing, and I think less of this as a value, but more as a skill, is to actually be able to pick up things across different experiences and connect the dots. Because then that's the value that you can bring as a consultant, because you're able to actually pick up things in different experiences and contexts and connect the dots and bring it back to a scenario that can actually help your particular client.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. What about, like, they talk about, like, time and, like, the value of time that a consultant brings to the table. What are your thoughts on
that? I think that's the only thing that a consultant can give is their time. Time and engagement, right? And that's essentially because there's...
Unfortunately, the people often, like, I mean, unless you're in an organization where consultants are valued in that sense, right? I suppose also we live in a world where people don't really understand or appreciate enough the value of a consultant, right? Because in some sense, unless you're attached to an organization that kind of says that it's in the business of consulting, what happens, what I was trying to ask you was, people often tend to think of consultants as free idea givers, and that, that there is no cost attached to that idea, unless the idea is actually saying, like, it's actually they implement that idea, so to speak.
Understand. Right? I think what people often perhaps don't understand is consultants actually bring an expertise, right? And without that expertise, then it's hard to do their time and energy. And so, and why would you bring that expertise is because you don't have that capability or that expertise. And so, therefore, it is important for you to know what you can do as an organization and or as an individual, and what gaps you have, and identify, therefore, the right person who can fill that gap. And then suddenly, the consultant that you bring in to actually help you through that will actually be far more valuable than you can actually put a value to, right? Because they're filling a gap that you otherwise could not fill.
Right. Sathya, I checked out your Instagram page, actually, just, and I saw so many pictures of food. So I want to know, like, are you guys foodies as a family, and do you enjoy cooking? What's your relationship with food? Because clearly, it seems like you guys have, at least you have a really intimate relationship with food, like so much variety in the food and the pictures. So I want you to talk about your relationship with food.
Yes, food is very, very close to what we do together as a family and bond over as a family. For me personally, cooking is actually a source of energy, perhaps because I don't do enough of it. And I tremendously actually value my time in the kitchen. I love experimenting with it. It gives me a lot of energy. Every time I've had a tough week or I expect a tough week, I actually end up spending that time at the weekend in the kitchen so that I can actually rejuvenate. So it's for me a big source of my personal energy. And I guess because it's central to me, everybody around me has now learned to love it as well.
Right.
And my husband is fabulous at desserts, and so I don't go anywhere close to that. I leave that entire department to him. My daughter is following his footsteps, and so she'll
Oh,
walk into the kitchen in the afternoon and just decide, oh, I feel like baking cookies, and whip it up. She almost doesn't need any supervision anymore. And
oh.
my son is really good at finding the right recipes and giving us the big picture view and giving us the ideas. We almost have to drag him in to actually lift a finger and do something, but he's really good about the big picture and tastes. And in fact, he has we always tease that he's going to grow up and be a food critic, whether that's a main profession or a vocation. He'll figure it out, but he can figure out nuances in the foods that
Oh,
we
wow.
actually put together.
Lovely. Super. Obviously, a family that eats together stays together. So definitely, like, food's like such an important thing that brings us all together. I want to ask you about the sari, Sathya, because this is the sari, and I usually save it for the last before I close the conversation. I want to ask you about, so many women who I've had conversation with have said so many fantastic things about the sari, and it has also helped me revisit my own relationship with the sari. I've like worn it like for the last 12 years, like constantly. And I want to know, Sari, how does the sari?
My relationship with the sari actually began on my 16th birthday. And I remember this distinctly because my grandfather decided that for his two granddaughters, this would be the gift that he, sort of gives us. It was my first Kanjivaram sari. I still have it.
Right.
And I remember draping myself that first time as on my 16th birthday and taking that photograph. And so
Right.
the love for the sari actually began then and
Oh,
has always been there. But when I was abroad for many, many years, it was really hard to sort of find the right occasions. And so when I finally
right.
moved back to Madras in 2010, it allowed me to actually upgrade my wardrobe. Um,
Yeah.
and, um, and find every and any occasion to actually find or even drape a sari.
Yeah. I mean, but what is it, from when you wear it, right? And when you probably wear it to work and stuff, how does it make you feel? Like, does it give you a sense of confidence? Does it give you a sense of identity? Uh, does it just kind of make you feel more feminine? I mean, I'm just curious to know.
So actually different saris make me feel differently, right? And so, for example, a soft cotton sari actually is much more about comfort. And I can actually laze around the house in a sari, right? It doesn't have to be PJs. The there are certain saris that actually have a certain elegance and lift you and your personality, right? And those leave me with a sense of confidence. And then there's bunch that actually simply make you, how shall I say this, look pretty. And that actually gives you a different kind of energy and bounce in your step. And so I think it really depends on the sari itself, Akhila. I think it's hard to say all saris evoke a certain emotion. I think different kinds of saris evoke different kinds of emotions and feelings. Right. Yeah, Ma.
You could be on Instagram Live. So don't you better try.